What's on your mind right now as far as startups
Yeah.
that just a message you want to share for the founders? We totally appreciate. Our community is amazing. What would you like to say to them?
Ask more questions. I don't think founders know, because they're all going into this for the first time, that all the stuff that you're going through as a founder has been done a million times before. You're braving like no new territory, right? You're like all packed up for this massive adventure across the country, and you don't realize that there's like a path taking you the entire way. And we are that path, right? The reason people fail in any capacity with us is they don't ask us enough questions. If you don't understand how a pitch deck works, every single slide, every single sentence, we can tell you every single sentence. You don't have to guess at any of this stuff. And when founders spend time with us and they just ask the questions like, hey, like, how do financials work? Like, what's customer acquisition cost? What does that mean? Number one, there's no reason you would know that, right? For 99% of people, this is the first time you've ever heard this. Just ask, and we'll tell you exactly what you're supposed to put. I can't tell you the value. That's up to you. I can tell you exactly what it's supposed to mean. I'm actually going to do a workshop here in an hour. I'm going to walk people through exactly what to do with their financials and all their projections. Almost every single person in that workshop is going to have never heard any of this before, but they showed up, the equivalent of asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're all going to leave today and be like, well, damn, that sure saved me an awful lot of time. So our biggest challenge with all the people that we have on Startups.com is that I just don't think that they're used to asking for help when there is an ungodly amount of help here. And we can basically take all that time that you're going to be figuring out things for the first time off your plate, so you can just go back to building your business.
I want to shout out a founder, Peter Fuchs. He always extols the virtues of the Startup Therapy podcast and just how much this community has meant. One piece of advice that he gave other founders when we were leading a community group, he said, Startups.com is not as much about the answers that you need, but learning to ask the right questions.
Which is
I thought that was great advice.
Yeah, it's invaluable, because my thing, and I didn't realize that this was my superpower, so to speak, going into building companies, is that I was perfectly fine with not knowing things, right? And we talked about this before, but even in the early stages, like when I started my first company at 19, I didn't expect to know anything, right? So I just asked questions all the time. And actually, I found out it was a really cool way to look smart when you don't know the answer. For example, I'm in a meeting with a client, and now mind you, I'm like 23 years old, and I'm in a big Fortune 500 client, and all the people here are like 20 years older than me at a minimum, right? But I'm the CEO of this the agency, and I don't want to look like an idiot. So when someone asks me a question and I have no idea what they're talking about, and I can tell like I don't know what's going on, I ask a question back, right? I was like, well, why would you ask me that specifically? Here's what's cool about that. It shows that I care. That's partially true. What I'm actually saying is, give me more context about what you just asked me, because if you talk about it more, I'll probably understand it. But guess what? I'll also learn, right?
That's a good one.
And I learned this when I was pitching for venture. Someone would say, well, how is it that the business is going to be that big? And I was like, well, why does it matter to you? Like, well, of course it matters to me. I'm an investor. No, why does it matter to you? What did you see in that total addressable market that made you think that's not big enough? When you start asking people questions, right? One, they're way more interested, right? This is a bad example, but when I was single, the reason I was good on dates was because I just asked a million questions. People love being asked questions, right? They're like, oh, Will was such a great guy. I was like, not really. I mean, hopefully I was, but like, I just asked a lot of questions because I'm naturally curious. And I think people appreciate that. And so I think for founders, being naturally curious, just asking lots of questions should become your default nature for everything. It's why I say I don't know the answer and neither do you, because I don't, because we have to ask a lot of questions.
Curious your thoughts on this. If I had one message that I wish our founders of Startups.com really received and took to heart, was just be a little more consistent than the next guy, the next founder, and eventually you will be successful. We don't know what it looks like, but just show up a little more consistently. Ask the right questions more consistently. Execute just a little more consistently than the other people who are kind of like action faking, because there's a lot of them out there. 40 million people want to start startups, but not all of them are going to actually execute. If you're just consistent, show up consistently, you'll be fine. That's what I wish they did. What do you think?
I think I don't think startups understand how other startups work. So in their mind, they just don't have the context for why that would be important, right? In other words, if you didn't know that people not showing up was such a big deal, you would assume showing up is like a given that everybody does. The parallel I'll use there is, Ed, I'm super into woodworking and in building a house and everything. And among contractors, right, which my entire family, all contractors, my dad's a carpenter, like everybody's in some version of a trade. They're like, how do you become a great, contractor, whatever? You actually show up. Most of them do not, right? You actually show up because the people next to you are not showing up. If you want to be the best landscaper ever, actually show up when you say you're going to show up. And while that sounds stupid, it only sounds stupid if you don't understand that other people don't do it, which is exactly what you're saying.